With today's political climate, topics of sexual assault, harassment, and domestic violence are constantly being discussed as to what they mean for the culture at large. In times like these, it's important to give solidarity to survivors and victims of these events. Take Back the Night is an annual event at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. The event is hosted by the Women's Coordinating Council, and they try to provide this solidarity. The Women's Coordinating Council, or WCC, is an organization that has been a part of UTK since the 1960s and has been hosting Take Back the Night since the late 1970s. But what is Take Back the Night? The PR chair of WCC, Anna Greer, explains the event's purpose.
Well, Take Back the Night is an event that rallies the community and the campus together in support of survivors of sexual assaults and domestic violence. We've been doing it for years, and it's a tradition at UT, and it's just a really great event for the campus and community to come together. There's a silent march, there's a resource fair, there's a keynote speaker who this year is Dr. Alexis Pauline Gums, who is fantastic, and there is, of course, the usual speak out where survivors come to share their stories in a supportive space.
The supportive space is a key aspect of Take Back the Night. The Take Back the Night Foundation says that their purpose is to focus on eliminating sexual and domestic violence in all forms. However, Vice President of WCC, Abby Jeter, says that the progression of Take Back the Night has made it become more of a healing space for survivors.
The kind of idea behind it was take back the night. We're taking back, particularly women at night, walking alone. It can sometimes be intimidating, scary. There's that whole narrative of, you don't know what's out there, you don't know who's hiding in the bushes, shadowy figures kind of thing. That's been a big part of the narrative for so long. Women carrying keys between their knuckles and pepper spray on their keychains, and walking each other to our cars and that kind of stuff. And so the whole idea behind it was, let's get together, let's reclaim the night and really reclaim our safety and our stories. And so what it's kind of grown to be is it's taken that theme, but it's very much about empowering survivors of interpersonal violence to kind of stand up and tell their stories. Especially, taking back the night isn't just, hey, I'm taking back this one space, this one time where I feel unsafe, but it's, I'm taking back my words that have been actively silenced. I'm taking back my story that I've been told not to tell or threatened for telling, and really just creating like an open space for people to kind of begin healing and get that sense of community by all standing up together and talking about it. There's this kind of idea behind Take Back the Night that's, we're standing together in solidarity, you're not alone.
While WCC has been providing this space for decades, this year they were faced with a brand new obstacle. Previously, WCC was an organization that was under what is now known as the Campus Entertainment Board, or CEB, which is directly funded through the university. Last year, WCC made the move from being a university-sponsored organization to an independently ran student organization. Jeter commented on what led up to this change and its effects on Take Back the Night.
Basically, for years, there had kind of been a disconnect within WCC over what our mission really was, what our values really were, what purpose we served on campus. For the majority of the past few years, our programs were mostly speakers, which sometimes was cool because we got to help bring people like Laverne Cox to campus, but it also was really stifling because there was no creativity or passion really behind what we were doing. We were just very stuck in bringing a speaker, bringing a lecturer, and that was it. And we're not the Women's Studies department, we're a student organization, so we really needed to reassess kind of what feminism meant to students of today in 2016 on UT's campus, as opposed to, what feminism maybe meant in Intro to Women's Studies 10, 15 years ago. And so we really needed to revamp and move in a more organic direction. And so we decided it would be a lot easier to be more political and do more advocacy, and really be student-led and student-focused if we were an independent student organization, as opposed to being a part of a bigger organization like CEB that's more tied directly within a campus department, because CEB does great things, the Center for Student Engagement does great things, but there's a little more oversight for what they do and a little more control within the office.
While this move made funding and planning harder, it was important to WCC to provide this event for the campus. Participant Michelle Derby, a junior at UT, said that the event is important to her as a student and what it does in teaching the students about, quote, how close to home all of this is. Take Back the Night is such a staple event in the campus culture that is even mentioned in UT's policy on sexual misconduct in Title IX, where it states, quote, public awareness events such as Take Back the Night, candlelight vigils, protests, survivor speakouts, or other forums in which students or employees disclose incidents of prohibited conduct are not considered notice to the University of Prohibited Conduct for the purposes of triggering its obligation to investigate any particular incidents. Student Clay McCammon commented on the aspect of students not having to worry about having to report while sharing.
I think that's really, really cool and a very special thing, and to not necessarily get around that rule, but sometimes you just want to talk about something without having to go through all the rigmarole of paperwork and reporting all this, because, I mean, that itself can be very triggering and very upsetting. Yeah. So I think that's very, very cool that you guys are able to do that.
With Take Back the Night being a safe space to share, it was important for WCC to provide support and ways of coping with sexual and domestic violence. Throughout the event, campus counselors were available to talk to participants who were triggered or felt overwhelmed. And at the beginning of the event, WCC hosted a resource fair.
The resource fair allows organizations on campus and in the communities to really share their experiences and say that they're a resource for people who come. The YWCA will be there, different groups will be there and have tables there. So basically you could either learn about how to get more involved in this issue, or if you're a survivor and you really just need someone to talk to or something like that, then you can just come and see what these organizations are offering.
The beginning of the event also offers other outlets for participants, such as the pledge banner, which people are allowed to put their handprints on and sign their names, pledging to help end domestic violence. The idea behind the banner came a few years back from a graduated WCC member with the idea that, quote, these hands are for healing, not hurting. Alongside the banner is the Clothesline Project, which stems from the Clothesline Project organization. The Clothesline Project started in 1990 and was inspired by the AIDS quilt as a way to share an experience through a creative outlet.
There is a Clothesline Project, and it's basically where you have t-shirts, and the different colors that the t-shirts are, like red represents incest, I believe, and purple is a survivor of either domestic violence or sexual assault. And so you come and you decorate a shirt, and based on, you can do whatever you want to the shirt. You can write whatever your attacker said to you. You could write, I'm a survivor or something like that, and then you could rip up the t-shirt for all that we care. We love it. And you can hang it up on the clothesline, and it makes a pretty dramatic image of all these shirts hanging up with all these stories of survivors, friends of survivors, and really conveys a really strong and powerful message about sexual violence and domestic violence.
A participant who wishes to remain anonymous said that they created a shirt the previous year, and it was, quote, soothing to get their story across in the form of art. The most known part of the event, of course, is the silent march.
A lot of campuses usually do a speaker and then maybe a speak out and then go into the march. We usually start with the march, and so because of the way that falls in the event, it's historically been a silent march, just to kind of set the tone of the event, the very serious kind of reverent tone. Because usually, when everyone's gathering for the march, there's kind of an awkward, nervous air. Everyone's really bubbly, trying on their t-shirts, checking out to see who else is there, talking, mingling. But once the march starts, everyone falls into formation, gets in that, pack of people. Everyone's carrying their signs, and then we start marching and it's completely silent. It just changes the whole energy of the thing. We're walking and it's quiet, and it makes you very reflective and also very aware of what's going on around you, which I think is also important. We don't really think about what's going on around us that often, and especially I think when we come together for events and things, we're not paying that much attention to other people, and when you're silent, you can't help but pay attention to what else is going on around you, because it's silent, but that makes everything so much louder because, you're paying attention to, the pace of the person next to you and, their breath, and, everyone's trying to be as quiet as possible, and so it just makes you so much more aware of, yourself and people around you, and I think that's really important, and it's really cool. We normally do a mile around campus, and it's silent, which is really cool because it's just normally when you see a big group of people, you expect things to be loud. And I think, especially walking into places like Pres Court where it is so loud, having such a tight group of people standing in formation, just completely silent, it really changes the energy and the air of what's going on. I think particularly on a college campus, everyone's running around and it's pretty hectic and loud sometimes. And so just seeing that, it just changes the air, and you can tell, even if you're not really sure what's going on, that people are affected by it, because they look up and they're like, what are all of these people doing here? Why are there so many people? Why are they all quiet? And then maybe they read a sign and they're like, oh, because it's really serious.
To many, the silent march and everything before that leads up to the Speak Out session, where survivors are able to freely tell their stories. At last year's Take Back the Night, no one stood up to share their story, whereas this year many people were quick to stand up and talk. Jeter discusses how their ability to control the tone of the event was what made it possible for people to want to share their stories.
I think the biggest change was the control of the tone that we had. Last year's Take Back the Night versus this year's Take Back the Night, just something as simple as being able to have control over what gets said on the Facebook page for the event. I mean, that's huge. And you have to kind of communicate Take Back the Night in a different way than just a typical program. You have to communicate that it's going to be a safe space, that, you are there for survivors, that you do understand how difficult it can be to get up in front of people and speak. And so just being able to control what got said about the event and the ways we were talking about the event, and who our speaker was and where we had the event, all of that stuff, it's so small, it seems like, but it makes such a huge difference, because if you have a space that you can make feel more intimate, it's going to encourage more people to speak. And if you have a speaker that leads into the Speak Out by being open and vulnerable, but also empowering others to speak up, as opposed to speaking about, sexual assault and domestic violence from almost like an outsider perspective, like just an issue as opposed to something that affects so many people's lives, that's important. And that can affect how safe people feel speaking up, because the speaker really sets the tone for that portion of the night, and what they say can really influence how comfortable people feel speaking up. And
the speaker for the event was Dr. Alexis Pauline Gumbs, who was the first person to do archival research on works for authors Audre Lorde, June Jordan, and Lucille Clifton. She also has her PhD in English, Africana Studies, and Women's Studies from Duke University. She spoke of her own personal experiences and read her poetry to the participants to share her story. At the beginning of her speech, she asked everyone to dedicate Take Back the Night to someone who inspires them and who they want to better the world for. She dedicated the event to her newborn niece. When she finished her speech, Dr. Gumbs encouraged everyone to come up and talk. After a series of anonymously read stories, several people stood and told of their experiences with domestic violence and sexual assault. An anonymous participant said that while they didn't speak this year, they, quote, thought it was courageous and inspiring, and said that they will definitely be sharing next year. After the Speak Out session ended, the event finished with a candlelight vigil to commemorate those who have died from the domestic and sexual violence. Jeter read from the poem The Old Astronomer by Sarah Williams, quoting, I have loved the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night.
I think it was one of the more successful Take Back the Nights we've had in a while. We had more attendance in both portions than we did the year before. We had a lot more people speak out than the year before. It just was a really smooth event, and there's really nothing that could have been done that would have made me really any happier about the way it went.
The next big event by WCC will be their annual showing of the Vagina Monologues in early February. They hope to continue their success as a brand new independent student organization. This has been Barbara Elizabeth Gibson. Thanks for listening.